Some of the world's greatest spies have been uncovered simply because of their failure to hide secrets properly.
In Russia, it's very tough to be a spy. They were all executed in the old days. There would be no mercy.
Miniature cameras, secret communication schedules, and stolen classified materials. Just some of the items that must be hidden in the world of espionage.
If it is hidden well enough, you will not find it.
Secret compartments, hollowed out walls, and even children's toys. Anything can and has been used to hide valuable secrets. Hidden properly, they can eventually be passed on to help or hinder a nation.
The secrets he betrayed made him referred to within the KGB and even the president of the USSR as number one. The greatest point of vulnerability for a spy is not when they steal the information, because a spy's been targeted and selected specifically because they have access to information. The difficulty in where most spies are caught is either they're caught with the information or with the special equipment they use to steal it. Consequently, the ability to hide secrets and hide tradecraft equipment becomes an integral part of a spy's training.
Training taught by all intelligence agencies. Retired KGB General Oleg Kalugin.
You have to be prepared to act clandestinely. It's in a secret way. And that means that you have to prepare in your home or in your office or wherever, places where you could hide the stuff prepared for an eventual transfer to the intelligence service. Whether this is in secret writing or this is film made by a miniature camera or whatever, you have to look for places which would be safe enough from kids, for instance, or from animals.
The longer stolen secrets can be hidden, the longer a spy can operate in a hostile foreign environment.
There is always some minimum amount of equipment they have to have. Because no matter how deeply buried a spy may be, they still occasionally have to communicate secretly. So they need a small pad with numbers. Now, ideally, if they think they could be caught, they may want to have money hidden, or they may want to have an extra passport in a different name.
Spies who have assumed the identity of another person and are living deep undercover in a foreign country use what's known as caching. Materials are hidden in a metal box, buried in a remote area.
The caches would be used to hide weapons, explosives, monies, food, and they would be used only in case of emergencies, not by regularly operated agents.
Tools of the spy trade must be accessible, yet well hidden. Items used on a regular basis must be kept within reach.
So the spy is constantly balancing accessibility with a way to be secret.
Spies have traditionally altered common pieces of furniture and everyday items into effective storage devices for their secrets. Referred to in the intelligence world as CDs, or concealment devices, countless items have been cleverly altered throughout history. Many of them, such as this altered can of powdered milk, are booby-trapped. Unless opened in the correct manner, the items inside are destroyed. Historian Keith Melton has been collecting the world's largest assortment of spy gear. A portion of his archive is housed in the historical section of the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. The majority of his collection is housed in a top-secret spy museum.
The museum is in a location that's never disclosed. Visiting it is by invitation only. Each year we have about 24 visitors, and they are generally retired professionals from various intelligence services around the world. There is no visual indication as to the location of the museum or the numerous security safeguards that protect it. There is one external indication, and that is a sign that once was on the building of the KGB headquarters in Riga, Latvia. There are more than 30 unique concealments and hiding places built into the museum. And today, for the first time, we're going to reveal a few of them. Because the museum is used as a teaching tool, it's very instructive to look at some of the very clever ways that spies can hide secrets and other things.
Thousands of artifacts from nearly every intelligence agency in the world lie in endless rows of shelves. Concealments used by spies during operations are everywhere. Like in the world of espionage itself, inside the museum, nothing should be assumed.
Here in the Spy Museum, when we constructed it, there are more than 30 unique forms of concealment, ways to hide just about anything up to several people. But one of the ones I like is items that are so simple and effective that they're here, they're readily available, but they're very difficult to find. And in a library with all the woodwork, it offers wonderful opportunities to confuse the eye, because the eye sees symmetrical patterns, and you don't think that there may be more than the eye can see. Here's an example of a column, a fluted column between the sections of books. You see just a normal bookcase, but actually, it opens to reveal a large cavity that could fit hundreds of documents. And it's one of the types of concealments that spies specifically like. Easy to get to, but very effective. If you think back to the movies, traditionally you see pictures of moving cases of books and things that swing open. Well, that's a lot easier to do in Hollywood than reality, and investigators know that. One of the things they seldom look for is actually moving shelves of books. It's very difficult. A fully laden single case of books may weigh half a ton, and to make it move fluidly and smoothly is quite difficult. Well, here's an example of one that has worked well, because when we built the museum, we designed all the shelves with that in mind. And this is an example of a very effective, smooth opening hiding place. And inside is where we monitor all the audio and visual happenings of the museum. It's our spy headquarters here. Any form of decorative accessory around a house could be used as a concealment. Now, most investigators would automatically look in this fake potted plant, and it could hide a secret, but it's not where the secret is hidden. Because what an alert East German technical officer did was actually build the concealment in this wooden plant stand. And it has a reverse thread. So if you normally tried to open it, what you'd be doing is tightening it. But inside is a large cavity. And the cavity has more than enough room for 2 passports, money, film, and coded escape instructions. And this piece remained undetected in an East German agent living in West Germany throughout the latter years of the Cold War. This small, low piece of furniture was constructed in East Germany, and it was used for an East German agent living in Berlin. And it was so skillfully built that it survived the Cold War. And at the conclusion, the agent pointed very proudly to where his secrets had been held. Inside, there are 4 different concealments. So far, I've only been able to find 3. One of the most effective is the fact that when you search a drawer, you normally look in it, you may look underneath it, but you seldom think to check the thickness of the drawer. This has been concealed by literally constructing a false bottom, creating a cavity, and in this concealment would hold multiple documents or passports.
Newly recruited spies usually don't have the skills to turn innocuous items into secret hiding devices. That's when agency craftsmen are called in to do the job.
They would find or buy for you or specially manufacture something where you could keep your classified information, something you would not wish others to know about. A lot of really intricate stuff to deliver to the agents to keep that information hidden. Suppose a jealous wife. For some reason, you did not succeed in keeping your relations with an intelligence agency well hidden from your wife. She has an intuition that you are meeting someone and you do not want her to know about it. She may suspect there's a mistress or someone. And she may start looking in your pockets or other places which she may suspect you keep something inside. Well, you have to be aware of these things, and you have to find places which are accessible only to you.
This appears to be a full but very pliable, moldable tube of grease. The tube comes off. In fact, it looks as if it's brand new and has never been opened. However, this is actually a concealment that would be in use by a spy, because inside is actually a very large cavity that would hold a large quantity of money, microfilm, coded instructions. This is a piece that was produced by the KGB for use by an agent operating in Western Europe. Now, a trained illegal with technical help would know that investigators never searched children's rooms with the same care and attention to detail that they do that of an adult. Now, this is a piece of tradecraft produced by the Russians. And it's simply a toy train, the same type of common wooden hand-carved toy train probably in most countries of the world. But if you pull the forward stack, inside is a cavity that will exactly hold a microdot camera and a spare roll of film. This is the type of extremely clever concealment that an investigator always fears is there, but you don't find.
No matter how clever a concealment device is, if it stands out from its surrounding environment, it is in danger of being discovered.
German investigators during the Cold War once searched an apartment in Berlin. They had a suspected female East German spy. They couldn't prove it, but they looked at the sparseness of the apartment. They looked at the sparseness of the refrigerator. There was nothing but mineral water and a lemon inside. But then they noticed in the kitchen is a heaping bowl of walnuts. And it turned out that her one-time cipher pads were hidden inside one of the walnuts that had been opened and then sealed back together. And in a very sparsely furnished apartment, a heaping bowl of walnuts was out of place.
Throughout history, there have been examples of spies hiding their secrets in unorthodox locations.
In the vocabulary of espionage, the Soviet intelligence services have their most valuable spy, one who is living under deep cover and has assumed a false identity. They label this type of spy an illegal, and it is from their S directorate, and it is their most secretive and most important directorate. At the end of World War II, the Soviet intelligence services realized that they needed to penetrate effectively the government and the military organizations in the new nations of Western Europe. And they immediately began placing illegals into the movement of transients. Their homes were bombed and they were moving through the countries of Europe in a way for them to lose their Soviet identities and pick up a new identity.
One of the most successful illegal couples in the history of the Soviet Union was Arshat Akopian, codenamed Yefrat, and his wife, codenamed Tanya. Their espionage began in 1948, first in Romania and then in Iran. Akopian had been issued a Minox camera to photograph the documents he was stealing. He determined that if he could keep the camera hidden, he could continue to operate indefinitely.
He finally came up with a technique that to this day is still taught in the SVR intelligence schools as an example of how creativity can be used to find a hiding place. Now, Yefrat knew that at his office, many people came in and out. So if he had a hiding place, it had to be something that was accessible but was relatively foolproof. And he looked around the office, and the only thing that seemed unusual was the fact that he had a ceiling, that we call a laid ceiling, in that you could actually lift up the fiber asbestos panels and have access up into the top of the ceiling.
Akopian found that there was space between the ceiling panels and the walls. He devised a plan to hide his camera within these walls.
He took his Minox camera and he put it inside a prophylactic. He put that prophylactic inside another prophylactic. And at the top, he tied a piece of string, a heavy twine. The twine was 12 feet long, and the twine at the end was a solid metal tag. Akopian would stand on his desk, very carefully lift the asbestos panel up, and reach in and hold the Minox camera in the prophylactic just over the edge into the ceiling down in the hollow space. Then he'd slowly reel out the string and let the Minox go till he was sure that it was now safely between the walls down at the baseboard level, but it was at a position that there was absolutely no access to it. Once he knew it was there, he would toss over the end of the string with a metal washer. At this point, there is nothing in his office that could be discovered without physically and invasively tearing into the walls to try to find it. But what was brilliant about his idea was when he wanted to retrieve the Minox, he took a common magnet that wouldn't be out of place in any handyman's toolbox or even in an office desk, and he tied a piece of twine to it. And he would literally stand up on the desk, move the ceiling tile, he'd drop the magnet, and he'd let it go down with string. Usually by the second or third try, he'd have attached the magnet to the metal tag. Then he'd pull the twine and he'd recover the Minox. He did this successfully for the remainder of his career.
After many successful years, Akopian and his wife were recalled to Russia.
And so as he was being returned, he knew that he had to leave Italy, he worked in Italy and France, go through a neutral country such as Switzerland, change his identities, and then get back into Russia. Because he wanted to leave no trail that anything had ever been out of place. And he knew he could destroy his Minox camera. But most valuable to him were several rolls of small Minox film that carried his final reports, the summary of everything he had done, and the final intelligence he was bringing. So he's faced with a problem. How does he carry these secrets with him safely? So he took a popular brand of chocolate. He froze the chocolate bar. He then created a plaster of Paris mold that duplicated the entire face of the chocolate.
Once the cast was completed, the chocolate was melted and a thin layer was poured into the mold.
He took his small rolls of Minox film, broke them apart, separated them from the empty portion so he only had the exposed film that was protected. He took the tiny pieces of Minox film cassettes and inserted them in the chocolate bar, then poured the rest of the chocolate. He let it dry, put it in the freezer, got it hard again.
Once the chocolate was back to its original form, he removed the mold and rewrapped the bar. They then packed it with 2 other similar bars of chocolate and proceeded to leave the country. They successfully traveled from Italy to Switzerland, but while checking through customs, their luck was about to change.
Akopian is targeted by one of the customs investigators, and he's asked to open his small handbag that he's carrying some personal items and the 3 bars of chocolate. The investigator looks down and says, "Sir, I am sorry. You are violating Swiss law. You cannot enter with 3 bars of chocolate. We have wonderful chocolates here. You're only allowed to bring in 2 bars. You must try some of our Swiss chocolates. I must take 1 bar." Akopian doesn't know which of the bars he's gotten. Is it the one with the Minox film, or is it just a normal one? So as the investigator holds it, he thinks quickly, reaches suddenly and takes it from his hand and says, "Well, that's all right. I'll eat it here." Peels it and starts eating the chocolate. And as luck would have it, it was a plain bar of chocolate. He consumed it and proceeded for the rest of his trip without problems.
One of the most devastating spies in U.S. Army history was Sergeant First Class Clyde Lee Conrad.
an NCO in Europe, a seemingly low-level soldier, and yet he had access to NATO war plans because he worked in the office where these plans were prepared on a yearly basis.
Though officers would come and go, he managed to stay in Germany for years, and he was so good and so efficient that every new and successive officer that came would immediately defer to him because he knew the plans, he was meticulous in keeping them.
Retired Army Colonel Stuart Harrington is the author of Traitors Among Us, Inside the Spycatcher's World.
The top secret document custodian in an organization like the G3, the War Plans and the Training and Operations section of an infantry division, is the person who literally has his hands on the combinations to the safe and, if you will, the keys to the crown jewels. Every single top secret document that's controlled in that division, in that G3 section, is Conrad's personal responsibility.
In the early 70s, Conrad's supervisor at the G3 section in Germany was former Captain Zoltan Szabo. A Hungarian immigrant, he joined the U.S. Army at 19 and was promoted through the intelligence ranks. Motivated by greed and nationalism, Szabo became a spy for Hungarian military intelligence and for 16 years delivered thousands of classified, top-secret documents. Nearing his retirement, Szabo did not have to look far for his replacement.
Szabo sees Conrad as someone who needs money, who is clearly susceptible to influence. Conrad's wife for a while is scrubbing stairwells to make ends meet. Conrad is known as Poor Clyde, who's never got a couple of bucks to go to happy hour.
Conrad was approached by Szabo and Sandor Kercsik, another Hungarian, who would serve as Conrad's courier.
By the time they're ready to make the pitch, Conrad is saying yes before they've even finished popping the question.
Conrad immediately began stealing classified information from the files he was sworn to protect.
One of his efficiency reports stated that Conrad was always working long hours aggressively, on behalf of the mission. What Conrad was doing was he was carrying out his copying during evening hours when people weren't there who might notice it. And in one case, he managed to seduce a female sergeant, and by seducing her, convinced her to wink at the rules so that Conrad could keep documents out of her top secret vault overnight in his work area. He was quite bold. And again, as a guy who had the support of his officers there and was regarded as a mainstay of the headquarters, he was able to get away with a lot.
Conrad's deception continued non-stop for over 15 years, selling Hungarian intelligence the Army's most sensitive and classified military secrets.
On a yearly basis, every time those NATO war plans were updated, he was providing copies of them to the Soviets.
Utilizing the latest technology was also a part of the mystique Conrad created for himself.
Conrad had received from the Hungarians a simple calculator, one that was becoming ubiquitous. As the price dropped, everyone used them, and this would function as any other calculator, except when he entered a special code name, and then the name he selected was the middle name of his young son, Damien. And when he entered Damien into the calculator, it allowed him to access a secret part of the computer memory. And here is where he stored all of his contact numbers, how he would contact his Hungarian controller, as well as secret ways to contact the Hungarian station in an emergency, and even his escape phone numbers.
In 1985, the CIA obtained information from deep within Soviet intelligence that a spy ring was operating in Central Europe, and for years had been stealing information from the Army's most sensitive departments.
The profile said whoever the spy is has been in Europe since at least the mid-70s, has been stealing war plans. Most of the war plans appear to come from the area of the 5th U.S. Corps. The spy, since it's the Hungarian Military Intelligence Service, might have some ties, either be ethnic Hungarian himself or some ties to Hungary. So it was this kind of a profile.
One of the strictest and most secretive intelligence operations run by Army Foreign Counterintelligence was opened and headed by Colonel Harrington. Select agents from the CIA, Army, and FBI were flown between headquarters in Fort Meade, Maryland, and Germany. This all had to be done under the strictest confidence. Any leak of an impending counterintelligence operation would be disastrous.
The West German security services were regarded by us as penetrated. And since the investigation was such a long investigation, had we gone to the Germans for help, there was certitude that the East Germans would find out about it, Conrad would be warned, and Conrad would flee to Budapest. So we had to operate around the Germans, and that was not easy sometimes.
It was a painstaking and detailed investigation. For 15 months, over 25,000 Army personnel files were examined, looking for anyone who might fit the profile of a traitor.
One day in January 1986, poring over an enlisted soldier's file, Clyde Lee Conrad's, Conrad had been assigned to the 8th Infantry Division almost nonstop from the late 1960s through his retirement in 1985. The more he looked at it, the more it dawned on him that this could very well be the guy.
Obtaining a conviction for espionage in the United States is difficult. It was important to gather clear and convincing evidence. The team started interviewing soldiers who had served under the sergeant, inquiring if at one time he had approached them about making easy money. One of those soldiers was Master Sergeant Danny Wilson.
We told him that we thought Clyde, his friend, was a spy. He was horrified and said, "No way, not my friend Clyde." And we said, "Well, we want you to work for us, and if you'll work for us, you'll have an opportunity to prove that Clyde is innocent, as you believe." And that began Danny Wilson's career as our agent, whom we put up next to Conrad. We transferred him to Germany. We had him re-enter Conrad's life and essentially play to Conrad's ego and see if Conrad might take the bait and see Danny as someone who years before had been approached but not reported the approach. Maybe he would reapproach Danny.
After 6 months, Conrad couldn't control his ego. He felt comfortable enough to start bragging to Danny about his career as an agent for the Hungarians.
And he also was very quick to brag to Danny Wilson, whom he thought was his protege, that he had this Palm device. And in there, Clyde showed Danny how there was an encrypted section, and you put a code word in it, and you could actually type in information. Conrad even bragged that in an emergency situation, all you had to do was turn it over, and this little hole here, just put the tip of a ballpoint pen in and push, and it would zero out the memory of the Casio. So if you thought you were in danger, you could zero it out.
Conrad never realized his rediscovered friend was working for Army counterintelligence.
He described a concept to Danny Wilson, which was to take a video camera and on the VCR cassette to have the beginnings of a movie, and then to sit with the camera over his shoulder and take a top secret document and page through the document slowly so that the camera, the video camera, would copy it, and then put at the end of the tape the ending of the movie. So sandwiched in the middle of the movie were secret documents or top secret documents done by video camera.
By August of 1988, there was enough evidence against Conrad to have him arrested. It was determined that Conrad would be prosecuted by the German government. The German authorities would make the arrest. A detailed search of Conrad's house led the authorities to some of his hiding spots.
Conrad had bragged that he had received more than $1.5 million in the first 9 years of his espionage. They couldn't find the money, but one thing they did find was a hollow file. This was in his toolbox. It appears to be common, just a simple woodworker's file, but when the handle is unscrewed, it also hid communication schedules that Conrad was using to make his contacts with Hungarian military intelligence.
Conrad's secret calculator was also found. Because Danny Wilson had remembered the code, all of Conrad's contact information was accessed.
And Conrad was in the Bad Kreuznach jail that night.
All of the major players in the spy ring were arrested and searched. The Kerchik brothers, couriers for Conrad since the beginning, proved to be sloppy when it came to hiding their information. It was a simple screwdriver left curiously out of place.
When they found the screwdriver, and they found it in a bedside table, something was wrong. An alert investigator said that that is out of place. As they examined it, the handle twisted off, and inside they found a communication schedule. Well, the communication schedule has to be mated to use with a shortwave radio. So they had a clue that somewhere in the house there was a radio. And in the attic, they found the radio, and hidden with the radio were years of messages that should have been destroyed. And the thread that led them all to it was an item that would have been probably ignored in an automobile or in a garage, but was out of place in a bedside table.
The overwhelming evidence against Conrad convinced the 3 German judges to sentence him to life in prison.
Clyde Conrad was the first, and to date the only, person in the history of the Federal Republic of Germany to receive a sentence of life in prison for espionage or for state treason.
With the information he had given them, they would have been able to anticipate the deployment positions of NATO forces in time of war.
And at that time, which was in the 80s, there was a certain concern that that could happen, that the Russians might invade through the Fulda Gap, and we could have a war. Our defenses were completely transparent to the Soviets because they had that war plan.
In 1998, 10 years after his arrest, Clyde Conrad died in a German prison of a heart attack. Unfortunately, his devastating damage to NATO was matched by another serviceman who betrayed United States naval security.
One spy, his treachery, betrayed the United States to the extent that in the 1970s and early 1980s, had we gone to war, we probably would have lost a nuclear conflict because of the secrets betrayed by John Walker. Walker is the most damaging spy so far that we know existed in the United States.
Former FBI agent Gerald Richards was assigned to the Walker case.
Well, there's various ways that people such as Walker get into espionage. In Walker's case, he was known as a walk-in. He literally walked into the Russian embassy here in Washington, D.C., and brought along with him his credentials, his military ID, and a stack of code cards for the cryptographic machines he had, and asked to see somebody in security.
After reviewing his credentials, the Soviets realized that he was genuine.
We could easily establish the identity of Mr. Walker as a man who indeed had access. Besides, he brought key lists. And the key lists were one of the best proofs that he was indeed a genuine walk-in, not a provocateur.
Cryptanalysis materials are the prize. They are the real prize because you can get a tremendous amount of information if you can break the other guy's code or be able to tap in on the other guy's codes.
They had intercepted our coded messages, but they had never been able to read them. And with Walker providing the code cards, this was one half of what they needed to read the messages. The other half they needed were the machines themselves. The Walker could give them repair manuals. He couldn't give them the machines. So within a month of John Walker volunteering his services, the Soviets arranged through the North Koreans to hijack a U.S. Navy ship with its cipher machines, and that was the USS Pueblo. And in early 1968, they captured the Pueblo, they took it into Pusan Harbor, they quickly took the machines off, flew them to Moscow. Now Moscow had both parts of the puzzles. They had the machine, and they had an American spy in place in Norfolk with the code cards and with access to them.
He was shuttled back out of the embassy in the backseat of a car with a disguise, and he was provided approximately, I believe, $1,000. And later on, he received considerably more money than that. He was contacted again at a later time, at a prearranged time, and that started his career for the next 17-plus years in espionage.
He was invited to meet in a week or 10 days at a prearranged place. He accepted, and we met in a week or so, where we discussed at length our future collaboration.
Concepts and tradecraft used by spies were explained in detail.
We told him that he should not bring classified papers, that he should take pictures of the classified papers and bring them in undeveloped film. That's important. We told him that we shall arrange and organize a series of dead drops. And by the time the meeting did take place, we already had a dozen or so dead drops prepared by our handler.
After the original meeting with the KGB, Walker would operate for several years without ever again meeting face to face. Walker enticed family members and friends to join him in stealing secrets for the Soviets. It became one of the most devastating spy rings in United States history.
The single camera most identified during the Cold War with espionage is the Minox. And this is the Model C camera that John Walker was advised to buy by the KGB. Very smooth, very efficient, very reliable, takes a great picture.
This particular model is the Minox C, which is the exact camera that John used. The case is very handy because it has a chain attached to it. Along the chain, you can notice that there's a number of little balls along the chain. One is at 8 inches, 10 inches, 12 inches, and 18 inches away. And those are the first 4 settings for focusing on the Minox camera: 8, 10, 12, and 18 inches. So if you're photographing a document, which at 18 inches, 8.5 by 11 document fits perfectly into this frame, you can use the chain in order to determine exactly how far away from the document you have to be by just lowering the chain down to the last notch that would lay on top of the document and then making the photograph. Keeps it in perfect focus.
And most importantly is the film that's used with it is this small. All of the film is in one side, and as you use it, it travels to the other side. So once it's been used, you can throw the rest away. Now, this would hold 50 shots of documents. Walker took more than 200,000 pictures.
Walker came up with the idea of using single frames from an 8mm film camera to shoot the documents.
With a 8mm camera, you can get several thousand photographs from each frame of that 8mm camera and still have one very small roll of film. And John reasoned that if he could reduce the amount of bulk he had and add more material to it, it would be a lot easier for him to transport.
Walker passed the documents and film to the Soviets through pre-assigned dead drops. He kept coded notes to remind himself who and how much everyone had been paid. The operation ran like a charm and was seemingly unstoppable.
It lasted almost 18 years, and we became aware of the spy ring itself through a telephone call by his former wife. Barbara Walker called the local office of the FBI and advised that her husband was a spy, and at that particular time she was drunk. When she was interviewed, she was fairly emphatic about some of the facts.
Since the FBI gets a lot of calls like that, it took them a while to really realize that this was the one of the 1 in 100 that was a serious call.
The FBI put surveillance on Walker. Eventually, he led them to a dead drop and was arrested.
When he actually was caught and when he was being debriefed and interviewed, he made no bones about it, that this was the family business, and his heir to the family business was going to be his son, Michael.
The other members of the ring were also arrested. An FBI team led by Gerald Richards was sent to go through Walker's house to search for any clues as to the secrets Walker had been selling to the Soviets.
When Walker's house was searched for espionage equipment, we had really no real good idea of what we would find, if it would be highly technical, if it would be very low-tech, but we went in there with the attitude we were going to look for everything and look as close to it as we could. Now, in this particular case, we were under court order. That means there's a limit to how much you can tear a house apart. I always would prefer to bulldoze it down and take all the pieces and cut them up and take them away, but unfortunately, they wouldn't allow us to do that.
The search team entered, and almost immediately, evidence of Walker's espionage began to surface.
John Walker wasn't a real good spy. Much of the material he should have destroyed regarding his previous drop sites or signal sites and locations, he had neatly tucked away in a bookshelf. Much of the notes he took were found in his desk drawer, along with the rotoreader. So much of the stuff was found readily in his den or in his rec room.
John Walker, the embodiment of 007 in his own mind, was really a sloppy spy. Because despite how much he talked the professional parlance of a spy, and despite how many books he read, at home he had been very sloppy. He had saved copies of most of the secret messages the Russians had sent him. He had saved copies of his dead drop instructions. They found on his computer ribbon copies of where he had answered the replies. They found some hiding places in his house, but they were relatively simple.
When we went upstairs to search a work area he had upstairs, in his closet, on a shelf, was a stack of classified documents that his son had brought, but he did not have time to deliver. Again, a huge bulk, which made it very difficult for him to deliver. And laying on one of the benches was the Minox camera, the Minox C, that he used regularly to photograph those documents. So again, most of the stuff that was found not hidden, not in concealments, but pretty much out in the open.
There is still belief by many that some of Walker's stolen secrets were never found.
Walker had an airplane, a small Cheetah, and flew over the eastern seaboard of the United States, and once actually flew all the way to Bermuda. With the range that he had in this plane, Walker could have flown anywhere and hidden things anywhere. Walker once led his investigators to believe that perhaps he had cached secrets in hiding places around the eastern part of the United States, thinking either at a later point he could sell them to the Soviets for money, or perhaps use the secrets to bargain his way out if he was caught. There was also a specific thought that in the bar that he and his wife had once owned and operated very near the Charleston Naval Base, that in the sand dunes behind the bar, there could have been a cache of documents. But at that point, following the arrest, the U.S. Justice Department decided against using scarce resources to either send the teams down to totally excavate the area behind the bar, or even, for that matter, to destroy the house and totally excavate his backyard.
John Walker was sentenced to life in prison. As far as the authorities are concerned, the case is closed.
Walker is in prison. He's supposedly cooperated, but still, as in any spy case, there are always unanswered questions and mysteries that still exist.
Mysteries that will continue as long as intelligence services use pawns to steal and hide secrets that can give their country an edge.
I think that at times there's the thought that spy versus spy is some sort of an exciting game that we play. And we try to recruit their spies, and they try to recruit our spies. And people might ask themselves, what really does it matter? But the truth is, when we try to recruit a Russian intelligence officer, it's not just to know about his service, but we want to know about the spies that they have in our country. And we want to know about the John Walker, who's providing Navy codes to the Russians, or the Clyde Conrad, who's providing NATO war plans.
The Russian intelligence will continue to operate in the United States, trying to use whatever means available in Europe and elsewhere to play these countries against the United States and to take advantage of the differences between the United States and other countries for the benefit of Russia. And this is exactly what the whole intelligence business is now about. No more ideology, but competitiveness, the Russian desire to emerge from economic and social crisis as a superpower again. The Russian intelligence will be as active and even more than before.